First of all, I welcome everyone to the Rotary Club of New York, December 2nd, 2021 meeting. I'm most delighted that you all could join us here today. We have a very interesting speaker who will be introduced in just a little bit by our first Vice President, Levent Oscourt. Unfortunately, President Gerard is unable to join us today, so we are very pleased that Levent can in fact lead the troops today, since he's, I understand, in Ecuador. So that's very nice that he could help us out with that. So I welcome, first of all our members, especially, of course, our past Rotary International President, Wilfred Wilkinson, our trustees, everyone that is in the room, and our esteemed guest speaker, Camden Black-Brown, who will be speaking in just a minute. I pass the word to Vice President Levent Oscourt.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing today? It gives me great honor and privilege to introduce Camden McDaris Black, Esquire, the Vice President of Development and Communications of the Covenant House, New York. He oversees all of their fundraising efforts, including foundation and government.
Is it my turn? Thank you so much for having me. I was so honored when Andreas invited me, I just want to apologize in advance. I got my booster shot a few days ago, and I thought I had timed it perfectly, and it just decided to hit today. So I'm a little bit groggy, but if there's anything that I can't answer today, I can always follow up and get the information for you. But hopefully the slide presentation I've created, which I created before the booster shot, will be thorough and give you a good sense of what we do at Covenant House, New York. So I believe I have screen sharing ability. I'm not a Zoom expert, but I'm going to try. Oh, that's great. So, all right. Can you see? Oops.
Yes, we can.
Great. 1 second. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this into the slideshow mode, and we're off. Okay. Can you all see the first slide that says an overview?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So basically, I'm going to give you a brief overview today of Covenant House New York's residential and support services. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions as I'm going through the slides. And of course, we'll have time afterward to do a Q&A period. So first, let me tell you a little bit about Covenant House New York, and we refer to it as CHNY by way of shorthand, about our mission and a brief little bit about our history and the work that we currently do. So we serve young people ages 16 to 24, as well as their dependent children. So that's usually minors between the ages of 0 or, including pregnant mothers and children up to about the age of 5. And so we serve them through a host of residential and support services. And we really do this with a philosophy of absolute respect and unconditional love. And everything we do is through a trauma-informed lens, which means we're very sensitive to the unique needs of all the young people we serve. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. And as you see when I go through the slides, you'll see the various offerings and how, some youth may go for certain offerings, some may go for others, but there's such a plethora that they can choose what's right for them at the time that they come to us. So we do our work primarily in Midtown Manhattan. That's where our main crisis shelter and service center is. And we're very proud of the fact that just this past month, we opened our brand new purpose-built 80,000 square foot facility. It's on the same campus as our older facility, which is about to be torn down. And this is just a really exciting moment in our history. I've been to the site, but I haven't fully explored it. And so I will throw out an offer in the new year. We're definitely taking tours. So if anyone is interested in learning more about our work and actually seeing the site, you can reach out to me and we can arrange a tour. We also have 6 congregate residential sites in the Bronx, and we also lease scattered site apartments, which is just a fancy term in the nonprofit homeless services world, to mean that we hold the leases for young people to get their own quasi-independent apartments when they're ready to move to that phase of their housing journey. But we still continue to offer them, case management and other social service supports while they're living in those apartments in the community. So who are our young people? Here is a demographic breakout, and you'll probably see that we serve several distinct subpopulations. 55% of our young people are female, and we have a significant LGBTQ population of 27%. 52% identify as African American or Black, and 38% identify as Latino. And then below those demographics, you can see some statistics on the needs that the young people have when they come to us. 86% are unemployed at intake. 56% have no high school diploma or equivalency certificate. 42% have evidence of mental health issues. 30% have spent time in the foster care system, and 21% have experience with domestic or intimate partner violence. So they have, an extensive number of needs. And again, as we go through the services, you'll see how we address those needs. So how do we work with them? We reach approximately 1,600 young people every year, and the number keeps growing. And as I mentioned earlier, we do everything through a trauma-informed lens, and that's bolstered by the implementation of evidence-based practices, which are essentially modalities and practices that have been tested, in controlled research studies. So we have evidence that they actually work with our populations. And now I'm going to launch into a program by program overview. So our largest program would be our supportive housing continuum. And this is broken out into several categories. So we have our crisis shelter, where young people can stay for up to 2 months. Then we have our transitional housing program, where young people can stay up to 2 years. And then our permanent supportive housing program, which, as I mentioned, it is where the young people can largely live independently, but there's usually something, either a mental health diagnosis or some other aspect of their lives where they're not ready to completely live independently. So again, in our supportive housing programs, they'll continue to receive case management services, which are described below. And if they needed, mental health support, job placement support, whatever their other needs are. Also, I want to call to your attention that we have a special housing continuum just for parents and their small children. So that means we have a designated crisis shelter, designated transitional housing, and even a supportive housing program just for young families, because we know they have heightened needs around childcare, and also we have an evidence-based practice that deals specifically with child development milestones, best practices around parenting, and just giving these young parents support, to deal with the struggles. I can say as a parent, the challenges of parenting young children, but doing so in a loving and nurturing manner. So continuing on the discussion of our supportive housing continuum, here are some statistics that might be of interest. So we provided over 115,000 nights of housing in the past year. Like I said, we served 1,600 young people, 1,602 to be specific. Approximately 317 young people slept in a CHNY bed on average. And then you're getting some averages of the lengths of stay. Again, as I said, young people could stay in the shelter up to 2 months, but they tend to stay approximately a month before they're moved on into a transitional setting. And they stay, a little over a year generally in our transitional housing, but they can continue on for 2 years if they need to. But they're usually by that point ready to look into their permanent housing options. And our supportive housing goes like a little shy of 2.5 years, because again, sometimes young people realize, okay, I don't need the case management anymore. I'm ready to really cast out on my own, or perhaps some sort of familial situation has changed. Perhaps they can move in with a family member. But we always try to ensure that they move on to a equally, if not more so, stable environment when they leave us. Now to talk a bit about our federally qualified health center. So we have a public health center that is open to not only the young people that we serve, but to the community. And it is located in our Midtown Manhattan Service Center, and has just recently been located into our new building. And it provides a very wide range of services, including OBGYN and pediatric care. We also host interns from reputable medical schools that provide dental work and other specialized services. So we really try to be a one-stop shop for young people around their basic healthcare needs. And in the last fiscal year, we saw over 1,400 young people, and they came to us, usually they were, repeat visitors who come to us for 2 or 3 visits each. And so we had a total of 7,185 medical visits. And now on to our mental health services. This is a very robust program, and I couldn't go into all the detail on this slide, but as I mentioned before, we have implemented a number of evidence-based practices. Some of the more common ones that people are familiar with are motivational interviewing, dialectic behavioral therapy, and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. We also have an evidence-based practice for people with substance use histories, and all variety of trauma. And so our highly trained and skilled social workers know, which ones to use in their individual sessions. And then they have numerous group workshops that employ these different offerings, and they will recommend youth to those offerings depending on their needs. So in our most recent fiscal year, we served 666 young people through our on-site mental health services. And another point of clarification, this is offered to both young people in our residential programs throughout the continuum, and also we also have a day treatment program. So young people who may have moved on from Covenant House, New York, can still come back and receive our day treatment mental health services if they require them. Now for our workforce development and education access program. This is a very robust program that includes a partnership with the Department of Education for on-site high school equivalency classes, which until very recently, due to the pandemic, were remote. Prior to that, they were on-site, and I believe they are on-site again now. We have other educational pathways, including soft skills training, like basic job readiness training, as well as connecting young people to vocational trainings that can lead to certifications, in areas like, beautician work, security guard work, computer programming, nursing, nursing assistance. So we have a wide variety of offerings to meet our young people's needs. We also have this wonderful grant from the Dreams Are Us Foundation that allows us to give partial and sometimes full, depending on the cost, scholarships for these training programs and for college, because we do have young people who go on to college while they're with us. And in our most recent fiscal year, we saw 340 people across our CovWorks programs. 225 of them participated in our educational offerings. 177 gained and maintained employment, and they were at a starting wage of $14.93 an hour, which is not bad for young people in entry-level positions. And 113 obtained vocational certificates. So our youth development program is sort of a catch-all, but it's a very necessary catch-all because this is where young people really are able to build out and feel affirmation around their identities. We have a number of workshops that focus on life skills, healthy relationships, and self-esteem building. We have a lot of recreational opportunities, both on-site, like we will have, not so much during the pandemic, but now we're ramping up again. We'll have on-site volunteer activities like movie night and bingo night and karaoke night. We also, again, prior to the pandemic and starting again, had volunteers teaching music, teaching art, nutrition education, offsite recreation, like taking young people to Broadway or to baseball games. So we really try to create a very, dynamic and fun environment, because these are young people, they need to have fun on top of getting, credentials and education. We also have an LGBTQ initiative called the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, and that's been very popular. Young people have learned how to advocate for themselves, give feedback to the agency about their needs. And again, also there's a fun component to that. And they do lots of recreational activities together. And we also offer, ecumenical spiritual offerings. While we are an organization that was founded in the Catholic tradition, we don't hold ourselves out as a Catholic organization. We are very explicit. We do not proselytize to anyone. And so when we say spiritual offerings, it's really about meeting the youth where they are and accommodating their needs around spirituality. So that's an important function of the youth development department. So this past year, 466 young people participated in life skills, healthy relationships, and self-esteem building workshops, and 109 participated specifically in the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. So our legal services and advocacy department is an exciting place. It's a busy place. There's so many legal needs that these young people experience. As you can imagine, there are numerous family law issues that they have to address around, broken adoptions, foster care subsidies, things which they're entitled to. Sometimes, sadly, foster or adoptive parents or biological parents too, sometimes commit fraud in their children's names, and there's identity theft. I mean, we actually have specific cases of that. So our legal clinic addresses these things on top of, name changes that young people sometimes want to create new identities as they strike out on their own, public benefits claims denials, immigration issues, criminal justice issues, and employment discrimination. Our advocacy team is active in legislative presentations, city council, they speak at the city council level. They've also gone to Albany. And what's really exciting about this is we have a youth advocate leaders program. So young people are able to take part in this advocacy work as well. So this past year, about 200 young people were served by the legal clinic, and we're able to have up to 4 young people. I think we've had about 2, but we're trying to ramp it up in the year ahead so that we can give more young people opportunities to become youth advocate leaders. And lastly, I'm going to talk about our anti-human trafficking services. I had actually reached out to Andreas originally about this. I had seen that the New York Rotary Club Foundation had funded GEMS, a very reputable anti-human trafficking organization in New York City. And Covenant House New York is currently, seeking funding in this area because one of our longtime funders has basically changed leadership, changed organizational priorities altogether. So we're going to be losing that funding in the year to come. So we really have our mindset on, what the future is, but we're definitely continuing this program as it is such a core and important program in the work we do. So basically our anti-human trafficking program spans the entire agency. In other words, it isn't just like sort of an encapsulated program, but it starts at intake when a young person is assessed using a brief tool to see whether they have any indicators of commercial sexual exploitation or human trafficking. And if they do, then they get a more rigorous assessment by one of our social workers. And if they are assessed to have any history with commercial sexual exploitation or trafficking, then they're basically put on a track where they get specialized case management and service planning and individualized therapy, as well as safety planning, because a lot of these young people are sort of, tied into this world. A lot of their traffickers, their abusers have, wooed them with words like, I love you, and, I'm your boyfriend, I'm your whatever. And so a lot of it is really talking to the young people about how to identify the difference between real love and support and manipulation and abuse. And again, we use peer group and leadership opportunities and evidence informed and evidence-based workshops to help these young people move toward a life of independence and freedom from trafficking. We also have a 5-bed safe house called Aspire Home. And this gives young people, specifically young women, a chance to really it's at an undisclosed location. So it gives them a fresh start to just move away from that life, and no one, knows where they are, and they're able to really work on their goals and build a new life without the temptations of, sort of falling back into those patterns and those abusers, hands, if you will. So in our most recent fiscal year, we served 68 young people in this program. We'll see where it goes in the year to come. I imagine we will see more young people. We just recently, we've had Aspire Home for a long time, but we recently moved it to a new site, a renovated site. So again, with the mindset that we want to give these young women just the most home-like environment possible where they can really heal and move forward with their lives. And then last, I wanted to conclude with a story about one of the young people that is open. She's very open about this. She is a survivor of human trafficking. I just want to say, I do use her last name here. She has given full permission for this. We are very, very conscientious about protecting identities and confidentiality for the youth we serve. So it is only because Paulina is a youth advocate leader. She's a survivor leader, and she's out there, and she wants to get her story out there that I'm sharing this information with you. So Paulina came to Covenant House, New York in 2020. And, she's not originally from the States, and she came over and she fell into the hands of someone who, claimed he loved her and ended up exploiting her. And it really shook her trust and faith in the world and in people. So when she came to Covenant House, New York, she was quite skittish by her own admission, but she was able to work with our amazing longtime Vice President of Advocacy and Human Trafficking, Jane Bigelson. And they immediately bonded, and Jane offered Paulina the opportunity to become a survivor leader, which Paulina immediately jumped at. She's an extremely bright and ambitious young woman. And so she's really been, over the last 2 years, year and a half, gaining skills around, the law and advocacy and speaking out to legislators and coalitions on this subject. And she's currently living in our Aspire home. And she has a full-time job at a financial training center, and she definitely wants to go to college. So, the sky's definitely the limit for this young woman. And she's not an exception. I mean, we see young people who are at all phases of their journey out of homelessness. Some have to come to us a couple times. Some may come to us for a few nights and then go away and come back a month or a few years later. But we have an open open door policy. You're always able to come back. And when you're ready to receive our services and you're ready to, move forward, we will be there for you. So, again, Paulina is this amazing success story, but we don't just, cream from the top and only like look at success stories. We believe that success can be had in increments. So, maybe for a young person who comes in with, substance use history, it's just, making some harm reduction decisions, to stop using certain things. Or, for a young person who's had tremendous instability, it might be just that they stay in our program for a month, versus coming for one night. So again, our social workers and case managers are just so culturally competent and sensitive to the varying needs of the young people that they are capable of serving a young person at whatever stage they're in moving out of homelessness. And that is basically my presentation. So I will stop sharing and take any questions you have.
First, I'd like to thank you for a most impressive and fantastic presentation on the wonderful efforts of the CHNY efforts. It's amazing to see that you guys don't just do housing, and you guys doing holistic efforts on mental health, workforce, scholarships, youth development. This is such an amazing thing where you're almost encompassing every possible thing to give these kids, these youngsters, a chance to move forward in every aspect of life, in education, workforce, mental health. It's really amazing. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I had a question about the anti-human trafficking services. Yes. You said you guys were running out of funding. How much is that funding, and what were you guys looking for in that aspect? So,
thank you for asking. So the funding, I should break this out because it's, as I'm sure you're all professionals, things are very layered. So the grant that we're talking about was about $350,000. Now, it's not quite as simple as if when the grant goes away, boom, we have no program. It's really a matter of, fitting the puzzle pieces together. We have some general operating support that can sustain the program. But as you know, general operating support or unrestricted funding is needed for, needed to fill the holes of so many areas in a nonprofit organization. So it is not ideal to use that money toward a program when it could be going to, custodial services and administration and other things that are so necessary for to run an organization like ours. So, we're chipping away at this sort of slowly and surely, and any amounts of funding we can get just move us closer to being able to fill that gap and disperse that general operating support elsewhere, so where it could be used in a better way. So $350,000 is the short answer, but we're tempering expectations that we wouldn't get that funding, from one source.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Sure.
We have a question from former member Zach Rawlings. Zach, go ahead with your question. Good to see you, by the way.
Thank you. Hi, Cami. Thanks. I've been a huge fan of Covenant House for many years. I was privileged to do 2 of your guys' corporate sleep outs. We raised a lot of money.
Wow.
We were on Good Morning America. I got my my Covenant House beanie.
Oh wow, you're a hardcore alumni. Whatever. I never know the suffix.
My wife worked for many years at Bellevue as a mental health professional and sent a lot of her patients to you guys.
Wow.
And her only complaint ever critically was you guys don't have enough beds. And so my question is, which leads to my question is, and just for some context for people that aren't familiar, I'm a financial advisor by trade, and a lot of my clients give to different charities, and they'll look at things like Charity Navigator to really make sure that the charity they're giving to is spending the money wisely and actually cause. And specifically with Covenant House, because I have a couple clients that are pretty generous to Covenant House, and you guys are ranked very high in terms of, I'm looking at it now, it's like 78 program expense ratio, which is pretty good. That's
Yeah.
like 3 out of 4. So, and the thing I try to explain to people is the reason Covenant House only has so many beds for their budget is the immense depth of services you provide to these young adults and kids. And I guess my question is like, what I know what I say for yours and other charities is that sometimes you got to look at the whole picture, and it's expensive to raise money and whatever. What do you guys, when you're talking to big donors and corporate sponsors and whatnot about, just how expensive it is to really address this problem on a serious level?
Right. So great question and a lot to unpack. So just to go back to your original point about, sort of a limited number of beds, interestingly, there's 31, I believe, Covenant House sites across North and Latin America. We're the largest site. We're the largest residential site in across the Covenant House Federation. So, sadly, like, it would be nice to have infinite number of beds, but we're actually considered quite big. And I know for a fact, one of our limitations of expanding, and I'll flesh this out a little more, but in our main shelter is the Office of Child and Family Services, the New York State Office of Child and Family Services has these regulatory limitations. And I won't pretend to be the expert on this, but we've often tried to expand, expand beds on our floor. And we can't. And again, I'm not probably the best person to talk about this, but there's regulations, like you can only have this many beds per this many square feet and da. So to expand on site at the main campus, it's limited by regulations. We did recently open, like in the last 2 years, a new 20-bed shelter for young women ages 21 to 24 in the Bronx. So we were able to expand our shelter capacity for the first time in, I don't know, decades. But these residential programs are super expensive. I mean, if you think about it, I'm not sure what the going rate is. I remember a few years back, a cheap residential program would go for $30,000 a year per resident. Now this is old data that I'm pulling from a few years ago. So I'm going to say it's probably closer to 40, 45,000. So we're talking, it is expensive to house people. So you take that. And so all of our residential programs, whether it be shelter, transitional, or permanent supportive housing, the core funding comes from the government, mostly in our case from the city and from the federal government. Although again, the New York State government actually regulates it. So many bureaucratic hands are involved. But we can't really start a residential program on private funding. Private funding, it primarily funds the support services, which as you all have acknowledged are so critical. And it also sort of fills the gaps because sadly, government funders do not really take into account all the needs to run a program. They generally fund about 75% of what is really required to run these residential programs. So I guess to answer your question, when we talk about it, we say, in order to expand beds or facilities, we've got to start with some core governmental funding. So that means an RFP has to come out that targets our population and is, roughly in line with the kind of services we provide, doesn't provide a lot of restrictions and limitations that don't fall in line with, the way we do our work. And then we still have to seek private funding to fill those gaps to make sure that the young people get the full array of services that they need to truly succeed in those residential programs. So again, it's all very layered. And it's always really a matter of, and I applaud our leadership because I've been here for 3.5 years now, and I find they have a very healthy balance of growth orientation, but not being overly ambitious and taking on more than we can handle, and then not providing excellent services. So it's a matter of sometimes growing cautiously and then deepening the services. So yes, if you deepen services, you're going to probably make each program more expensive to run, but it's going to be a better quality program all around. So that's sort of where we fall, is like just enough expansion to get more young people in the door, but not to go so crazy that they're getting thin services while they're with us.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the group? I'm sure there are some. There's
I see one in my right corner.
You do?
Pildes.
Oh,
Right?
Scarlett. Yes, actually, Scarlett is one of our trustees. Scarlett, unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. A very moving, fascinating presentation. So many questions, but the one that comes to me now is the sexual exploitation and trafficking. You mentioned women, but
Yes.
sadly, as we know, even boys are victim.
Very
Do you
much
have
so.
services for them as well?
Yes, to clarify, and I don't think it was clear in the slides, all services are for all gender identities. The only service that's limited to women is the Aspire Home, the 5-bed safe house. And that's just a capacity thing. Again, kind of going back to what I said about, starting up residential programs. So the only so again, a young man who has been, commercially sexually exploited or trafficked in any way can get all the other services, from assessment to social work to case management to everything. And they can, of course, reside with us in our shelter, transitional, or permanent supportive housing programs, and they'll continue to get those services. The only offering that's not available to them at this time is being in an undisclosed location, at the safe house. So yes, we're very sadly, aware of, the complexity and diversity of survivorship of trafficking.
Thank
It's a
you.
great point. Very good point, though. Thank you for asking.
Thanks again to Scarlett for posing this question. I also wanted to mention that one of the reasons why I invited Camden is that we have actually a history of collaboration that goes way back, I think, in the early 2000s. So that we already, as the Rotary Club and its foundation, have collaborated with the Covenant House, and hopefully we can do so again. Do we have any other questions from the group or from our Vice President, Levent? Anyone who wants to dive in?
I have a question.
Jan, yeah, actually show your face if you so would. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
You're such a handsome man.
Well, that's the real reason I did it, to get a compliment. Anyway, I remember Father Bruce Ritter from a long time ago. So what you're doing now is great, but how long did it take to bounce back from that whole scandal?
Well, it's like that elephant in the room, and I believe was it the early 2000s or late night? I don't know. It was hard. And, the one thing, I think it was a pivotal turning point in the organization's history, where they brought in board, and they brought in all the right people to audit and to drill down and say, this can never happen again. And so we actually have evidence of that. I'm sorry, I apologize. My child is outside the door. I'll be back in 1 second. I definitely want to address this question.
So maybe for people who don't remember, Father Ritter was involved in a Me Too scandal.
So Father Ritter, for anyone who doesn't know, was actually the founder of Covenant House, and he was a priest, and he ended up being implicated in and charged, or I don't remember if he was actually charged, but he committed youth sexual abuse. And so as a result, as I was saying, we brought in a team to just basically really get down to the bottom, vet it. And as a result, I can speak to where we are today. All Covenant House sites, all the 31 Covenant House sites are under and are accredited by Presidium, which is a nationally, perhaps internationally recognized youth protection agency, and they are very rigorous. They audit us. audit us. They require trainings throughout the year, every year at minimum, and then like follow-up trainings in child safety, child protection. We are all, every single staff member of Covenant House, of all Covenant Houses, but of Covenant House New York, which employs me, we are all mandated reporters. So development people, finance people, everyone is a mandated reporter. We are all responsible for having our eyes and ears out on youth safety and the potential for abuse. And we get trained in it, like I said, throughout the year. So these rigorous checks and balances have been put in place because, you know, it was an awful wake-up call that, you know, this is not an agency that's just like, you know, touchy-feely kumbaya. You know, we have a compliance department that, and I could talk a blue streak because I work very closely with compliance because, you know, I'm in communications as well as development. And when I told you that when I shared Paulina's story, the reason I said, I want you to understand, Paulina has given us express permission to talk about her. We don't show our youth's images. We don't talk about them without their express permission. And like it sometimes it can make funders and other stakeholders a little crazy because like our volunteer process, and I'm also overseeing the volunteer department, our volunteer process is incredibly rigorous. Like you get background checked, fingerprinted. It takes like 2 months. Like it's almost like super labor intensive because at the heart of everything we do, it's to protect the young people that we serve. So we now have like gone to the other end of the extreme, like everything we do is through the lens of safeguarding the young people in our care. So, you know, we've really done a 180 in that respect, in that everything starts through the lens of child safety. And again, to the point where I have numerous stories, but when people interface with our young people, which is rare and controlled, you know, if a volunteer asks a question like, well, how'd you come to Covenant House? You know, what happened in your life? You know, a staff member will redirect them. Like that's too invasive. Like we are very protective of our young people's confidentiality and their ability to feel, you know, safe in the space that we've created for them. So yeah, so we've come a long way. I mean, and it's definitely a dark place in our history, but you know, I think, and it's never something that you can justify, but we learned, you know, that we had to take measures to really, you know, instill and implement safety measures across the agency and make it, you know, very clear to all staff that we are each personally responsible for ensuring the safety of young people.
Thank you, Camden. I have a question myself. What kind of volunteer tasks are you generally looking for after you fingerprint and did all the background check? I mean, what are the tasks that you require the most? And then I pass to Zach, who has another question. Sorry.
Sure. So, you know, there's been a stay in our volunteer program because of the pandemic, but we're slowly ramping back up. So I'll speak in terms of like our ideal scenario when things are, you know, going as they should. So we have some of our main opportunities with the youth include mock interviews in our CovWorks department to get them prepared to go on job interviews, resume prep and other sort of career mapping, as we call it, you know, professionals talking with young people, what are your interests, and kind of young people getting a chance to figure out, well, how do I get from this point to the next? I'm sorry. Helping young people sort of figure out what the practical steps are to achieving their professional educational goals. So those are two of the really popular ones. You know, around the holidays, and again, this holiday is a little hybrid, you know, since we're not completely out of the, you know, the COVID waters yet. But volunteer opportunities are usually abounding during the holiday season. Sometimes there's gift wrapping to be done. Sometimes, you know, again, in the past, sometimes a group of volunteers would come in and throw a party for our young people, a holiday party or something, or serve a meal. So those were popular. And again, throughout the year, in addition to the ones that I mentioned, sometimes we've had tutoring. Other opportunities that are not youth facing include, we have a wonderful clothing room where young people can get anything they want, clothing, shoes, accessories for free, called Covendale's, and you know, helping to arrange, you know, the new donations in a friendly fashion so that the young people can actually find what they want. That's another volunteer opportunity. So, and then again, speaking in an ideal world, if a volunteer has a great idea, like I am a ceramicist or whatever, I do these beautiful clay sculptures, whatever, I would like to teach a class once a month for interested young people in art or whatever, or music. Those are also opportunities.
Thank you. First, Zach, and then Malika. Go ahead, Zach.
I think you're on mute.
Sorry, me again. So I was gonna say, first off, Andreas, for anyone that doesn't know, the Covenant House came up with this really cool fundraising technique of the sleep out. And Kim, you can probably describe it better than me, but basically, you get your own page. I know the real estate industry in New York has done their own sleep out. We as a firm, at my previous firm, we did one as a sleep out. I think my former partner, Rick, is actually on your board, Cami. So he was.
Oh, Rick Van Benskoten?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of our board members.
Yeah, so we did a sleep out just as a firm, and we raised a lot of money, and we made it a competition, and you literally sleep out on the streets of New York for one night, and it was an amazing experience. And I mean, they have an area that's blocked off. There's a guard. It's not as crazy as it sounds, but it was definitely miserable. And you get a thing of cardboard and a sleeping bag, and that's it. But a lot of long underwear. But so I would say that if anyone's interested, that's an amazing way to do something. And part of the experience I found valuable was the kids, and like you said, Kimmy, they volunteered. They weren't told they had to do this.
Totally.
Spent time with us. And they talked with us, and I watched as some of my colleagues who were less familiar with, the issue of homelessness and especially youth homelessness, just be shocked at some of the things they learned. They couldn't believe every young adult that was there to talk to us was gainfully employed. That was somehow surprising to them, and that you guys helped them with their finances to make sure that the money is
financial
not
counseling.
Yeah, and so it was really cool. But my question, I guess, totally changing gears. My question was, how has the pandemic affected the day-to-day? As far as I understand, like I always keep saying kids, the young adults are housed pretty close together in dormitory-style environments. I mean, what's that been like?
Yeah, so great question. So again, hats off to our leadership. I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh. Starting before New York City really locked down in March, they started meeting daily and put in place, as soon as like the lockdown was in place, everyone was already ready. So as you can see, I'm in my glamorous Bronx apartment. All non-essential workers were moved off site immediately. And this again was before the decree, coming down from above. They were like, move you off site. So we just in that and of itself, staggered staff. Then staff, essential workers were further staggered, always meeting the required youth to staff ratio, but keeping a lean team. And the essential workers were paid hazard pay for quite a significant portion of time early on in the pandemic. The youth themselves, our health center acquired testing capabilities very, very early on. So, and of course, no one's forced to do anything, but all youth who came in through intake were required to be tested. And if they were suspected, if they were presenting with signs, I think at the time we ended up getting rapid testing, but at the very onset of the pandemic, we only had the PCR. So while waiting for a young person, if they presented any signs of potential exposure, they were put into one of our wellness rooms. So when when the administrative staff were moved out into our homes, all of our offices on the 8th floor were turned into wellness rooms. Basically beds were put in, and because of our old building, actually our offices had bathrooms in them because it was like a converted, nursing home or something originally. So these young people had their individual rooms with, set up like any kind of dormitory, but a single, and they had their bathrooms and their showers, and they would have a residential advisor, masked, working with them to like make sure all their needs were met. They were given tablets so they could communicate with the outside world, had entertainment, do their education online, whatever they were pursuing. So in the very beginning, we had these extremely rigorous measures, in accordance with the safety needs at the time. And then so as things evolved, so everything was virtual programming wise. Slowly, as rates dipped and such, some small group activities were brought back on site. Everyone's masked, socially distanced. And then I'm trying to think, by December of 2020, whenever the Moderna vaccine actually became available, our federally qualified health center was administering the Moderna vaccine and has continued to do so ever since. So young people who at the time, I guess you had to be over 18, but the vast majority of our youth, our young people, are 18 to 24. So the vaccine was offered to them, again, not compelled, but offered. And at this point, all staff are mandated, obviously, because of New York State has mandates now for people working in congregate settings. We're all mandated to be vaccinated. So it was an evolutionary process, but at this point, we no longer have the wellness rooms, but we have the vaccines and the testing at the healthcare center, and we're still maintaining, hygienic practices. Everyone's masked inside unless they're in their own space, and they are all, we're social distancing, small groups still. So, and, knock on wood, we haven't had any tragedies. We did have quite a number of young people who tested positive, and they remained in their quarantine rooms and they were attended to. And then when they came back with like a second negative test, they were moved back into general population housing.
Thank you, Camden. Malika has a question, then Tom McConnell. Malika, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, so thank you, Cami. It's a very good presentation, very comprehensive, very informative. And I learned many things. Now, this program deals with the segment of the population during which really a healthy, productive citizen is made or could fail. And also there is this, some of them come from a failed foster care system.
Definitely.
Now, I was most interested in the Aspire Home setup. Is the police involved in this?
So a police report would be made, and again, apologies because I'm not an expert on how the criminal justice system works in this case, but yes, a police report would be made if a young person has, been immediately the victim / survivor of commercial sexual exploitation. Our legal department and our advocacy department and our AHD, like our whole team, but mostly our legal and advocacy, have very close working relationship with the local police precinct. Also very close working relationship with the Port Authority Police Department, which I believe it's its own department. So they do work very closely, and where appropriate, yes, a police report would absolutely be filed. Then, after that, then the safe house itself is just the place where the young women can heal and grow. But if there is any need, like if, heaven forbid, the aggressor, the abuser tries to reach out, or there's any confrontation ever, yes, absolutely, we would, bring the police in if needed. Yes, absolutely. The young women's protection is as utmost safety, as is everyone's protection in our care. But yes, with the Aspire Home Women, it's at the top of the list.
Thank you. Very interesting. Really.
Thanks. Tom McConnell next. Tom, good day.
Yes. Hello. Good day, Andreas and everyone else. I was really impressed to hear those statistics, how well the Covenant House has come back. And when Jan brought it up, because anyone in our age group remembers that when that scandal broke.
Absolutely.
I think it's because it was one of the first times it happened. Before there was a lot of other scandals about the Catholic Church and all. And,
right.
And one of our presidents, I can't remember now if it was Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan's first lady, went to visit there like a month before the story broke. And that's what made it even more dramatic.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
really glad to see how well you're doing and that you did come back. Like it was very, very popular until that. And Father Ritter was considered like the devil. He would be ridiculed by everybody. That Saturday Night Live would do skits on him as a devil. It was an amazing time, and I'm very glad to hear that it's come back. Is Covenant House basically a New York City a group?
So the structure is this. So a little confusing. So Covenant House New York is an independently operated 501c3. So like we have our own board, we have our own executive director, all of our EIN number, it's our own, but we are part of a 31 site federation. So when you hear Covenant House or Covenant House International, that is another entity that is like our federation headquarters. And as Zach was saying, the sleep out, Covenant House International is the one that hosts the sleep out. So, and while Covenant House New York and all the sites participate, like that isn't in my shop, so to speak, although again, very, symbiotic relationship, but Covenant House International does the sleep out and some other, high profile events. And then those benefit all of the 31 sites in some way. But Covenant House New York is itself just an independent, when I say independent, I put in quotes because again, we are part of the federation, like we have certain things do overlap. So as I mentioned earlier, the Presidium accreditation for youth protection, the entire federation, and Covenant House International manages that relationship and makes sure that every single site complies. And then there's some other things around HR and benefits and payroll systems that are standardized across our sites. But everything else, we all the 31 sites serve young people experiencing homelessness, but we can do it in our own way. Like we each have programs tailored to our, geographic region that makes sense for our young people. So it's independent, but within a family, if you will.
And is that the building there's the new building that's right next to the old building on, was it 8th Avenue?
It's between 10th, it's on 40, oh, am I so bad? 41st and 40th and 10th Avenue and Dyer. So it's right in that complex. And there's like the old building still standing, and then it was actually originally a three building complex, and they demolished 2 of the buildings, and now we have a building and some wonderful like outdoor space, some terraced space where the old 2 buildings that were demolished are. And then they're going to raise the 3rd building where we were working right up until the new building opened a few weeks ago. Okay. They're going to raise that, and then they're going to build offices, and Covenant House International actually owns the property. They're going to lease out those offices as a revenue generating feature, and also take over some of the floors for Covenant House International offices. So it's a multi-phase project that's been in the works for like 5 years. And so it just happened that it came to fruition. The main part, which is our service center and shelter, came to fruition, a few weeks before me coming here today.
How many youth would you say you shelter in Manhattan a night or a year?
So I think we're 140 at our shelter in Manhattan. And I'm trying to recall this. So like I said, it's about 300 odd people a night, but I think that would include all of our sites. So do the math. So 140 people a night.
Manhattan?
I mean, in Manhattan, yes, we're usually at capacity. Yeah.
But you did a very good job, Carrie. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for those questions. Do we have any final questions for Camden? Otherwise, I pass the word to Vice President Levent. Levent, would you like to say some concluding observations or anything? You're muted, Levent. You're muted.
Thank you, Andres. First, Andres, thank you very much for setting this up. This has been a fantastic presentation. Our speaker was phenomenal. No evidence of any COVID side effects.
I know. I was impressed. I was like, I came into this barely awake. I had like 3 coffees. Maybe that was it.
You were absolutely awesome. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And we look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Wonderful. So do I. And once again, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Camden. And obviously we will stay in touch about future collaboration and everything else that we can work together on, hopefully. I wanted to finally bring everyone's attention to next week's program when we have our own member and epidemiologist, which is like the hardest word to say, really. Dr. Maria Gasipura. She will speak specifically on the Omicron COVID variant and outlook, and she will guide us safely through the holidays and how we should be behaving and all else. So that concludes our meeting today. Thank everybody for joining. Thank you on some of the participants that I had mentioned, others that I may not have mentioned, but it's good to see past member Zach Rawlings be back and give such valuable contributions to our program. Obviously, Dr. George Onura, Board Director Wilfred Wilkinson, our past Rotary International President, what an honor as always, Jan Brown, past President Olaf Schmuser, our board member Francis, who joins us from the West Coast, and so on and so forth. Of course, our President-elect Alexander Litvinov. So Cami, as I may call you now, maybe as a friend, I thank you. I wish you a great week and hopefully not too high of a temperature today. And
thank you.
All the best. We stay in touch. Okay.
All the best to you all. Thank you again.
Take care.
Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.